Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be giving a presentation about the possible adverse health effects related to bisphenol A, commonly known as BPA, exposure. This presentation is intended for the residents of Pulaski County, and I am your speaker, Madison Kolb, an environmental health specialist for the Arcasippi Health Department. During today's presentation, I will be discussing the following topics. I will be explaining what is bisphenol A, or BPA. I will be listing some common sources of exposure. I will be talking about why people are so concerned about BPA. I will detail some of the possible adverse health effects related to BPA exposure. I will be talking about the regulation of BPA in the United States. And I will be discussing some ways to limit BPA exposure. I look forward to educating you, the residents of Pulaski County, on these topics. To start off, what is BPA? BPA is the commonly used name for a chemical that was first synthesized in 1891. I have included its formal name and its CAS number, along with the chemical structure. Since its synthesis in 1981, it has been used as an industrial component in the synthesis of polycarbonate plastics and epoxy resins. Polycarbonate plastics are used to make some beverage containers, compact discs, plastic dinnerware, safety equipment, automobile parts, and toys. And epoxy resins are used to coat food cans and in dental sealants and other products. I've included a figure that explains the routes and sources of BPA exposure on humans and the biological samples of BPA detection. Among the BPA exposure routes, the most predominant route is via the GI tract, followed by the respiratory and dermal tracts. The top contributor to BPA exposure on general population is water and food from dietary route, followed by air and dust via inhalation. Thermal paper and dental materials play minor roles in human BPA exposure. The occupational BPA exposure focuses on the cashiers and workers who produce BPA-related products. After entering the human body, BPA can be detected in various biological samples, including blood, urine, saliva, hair, and more. I would also like to add that new studies have shown that there is human fetal exposure to BPA via amniotic fluid and placenta. So why are people so concerned about BPA? The reason is that human exposure to BPA is widespread. In the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey conducted in 2003 to 2004 with the help of the CDC, scientists found detectable levels of BPA in 93% of Americans ages 6 and up. Laboratory studies have shown that exposure to low doses of BPA can have negative impacts on the reproductive systems of some animals. However, more research needs to be done to fully understand the potential implications of BPA exposure on human health. While the health effects of BPA on humans still lack absolute clarity, I'm going to explain some of the possible adverse human health effects. For starters, BPA can act as an endocrine disruptor in humans. This is probably the most widely documented and commonly seen effect on the limited amount of studies that we have. BPA has shown to have estrogen-like and anti-androgen effects, which could cause damage to different tissues and organs, including the reproductive system, neuroendocrine system, and immune system. I've included a schematic diagram illustrating the mechanisms of BPA toxicity. BPA induces corresponding biological effects through the activation of intracellular signal transduction pathways and the regulation of gene expression mediated by cell surface receptors and nuclear receptors. On this slide, I've included some of the more commonly reported possible adverse human health effects of bisphenol A exposure. We'll start with the reproductive system. Multiple studies have shown that BPA's primary effects are disturbing the exertion and action of sex hormones and influencing the development and function of the reproductive system. For females, studies have shown that bisphenol A exposure correlates with an increased risk of polycystic ovarian syndrome, an increased risk of adverse pregnancy outcomes, and precocious puberty in school-aged girls. For males, BPA exposure has shown to correlate with reduced sperm quality, decreased sexual function, and decreased fertility. Next, we'll talk about hormone-related cancers. Some studies have shown that BPA exposure may be a risk factor for the development of certain cancers, such as breast, prostate, ovarian, cervical, and lung cancers. BPA exposure also has several shown effects on non-reproductive tissues. One study showed that higher BPA exposure may be associated with an increased prevalence of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and abnormalities in liver enzymes. It has also been documented that levels of BPA are strongly correlated with the risk of some neurodevelopment diseases, such as autism spectrum disorder and ADHD. I've included a table from an article titled "The Adverse Health Effects of Bisphenol A and Related Toxicity Mechanisms," published in Environmental Research in 2019. I like this table because it lists the multi-system toxicity of BPA on humans, and it organizes it by system and also includes reference articles. As I am educating you, the residents of Pulaski County, on the possible adverse health effects related to bisphenol A exposure, it is important for me to make this clear. The CDC maintains the stance that more research is needed to understand the human health effects of exposure to BPA. While many scientists and researchers have discovered possible adverse health effects in multiple body systems and tissues, there still is more research that needs to be done. Several United States government agencies have made regulations regarding BPA. The Environmental Protection Agency sets reference doses as the maximum acceptable oral dose of a toxic substance. The EPA has set the reference dose for BPA at 50 micrograms per kilogram of body weight per day. The Food and Drug Administration has determined that BPA is safe at the current levels occurring in foods. However, they did make a few amendments. In July 2012, the FDA stated that the use of BPA-based polycarbonate resins will no longer be permitted in baby bottles and sippy cups. And then in July 2013, the FDA ruled that the use of BPA-based epoxy resins would no longer be permitted as coatings in packaging for infant formula. However, it is important to note that the safety of a food additive is not relevant to the FDA's determination regarding whether a certain use of that food additive has been abandoned. There were several other factors that went into this decision. If you are concerned, there are several personal choices you can make to help limit your BPA exposure. For starters, you can use BPA-free products. There are 7 universal identification numbers on the bottom of plastic containers that help consumers identify the materials used to make them. In this instance, you should look for the number 7 on the bottom of plastic containers and avoid. Also, you should take extra care to not microwave or wash polycarbonate plastic food containers in the dishwasher, as when BPA products are heated, they actually leak more BPA out than usual. You should also try to avoid canned foods and eat fresh or frozen foods whenever possible. Additionally, you could use alternatives if possible. Good alternatives would be glass, porcelain, or stainless steel products, and especially make this switch if you know the container will be exposed to heat. In summary, bisphenol A, or BPA, is an organic synthetic compound widely used to make polycarbonate plastics and epoxy resins. Polycarbonate plastics have many applications, including the use of some food and drink packaging, medical devices, and more. Epoxy resins are often used to coat metal products such as food cans, bottle tops, and water supply pipes. Some dental sealants may also contribute to BPA exposure. While many animal experiments have shown that BPA could have possible harmful effects on multiple organ systems, more research must be conducted in order to accurately and confidently predict the effects of BPA exposure on human health. Based on its most recent safety assessment, the FDA has determined that BPA is safe at the current levels occurring in foods. The FDA does continue to review all of the available literature and studies on BPA and will make updates to the regulations if needed. I want to leave you, the residents of Pulaski County, with this. While in today's presentation, we went over the several possible adverse health effects related to bisphenol A exposure, it is clear that more research must be done. The purpose of this presentation was not to scare you, but to make you aware and educated so you can make your own personal choices regarding bisphenol A. The FDA, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, maintains its stance that yes, BPA is safe. I've included a list of external sources that I referenced throughout the entirety of this presentation. I could not have done this presentation without the information I found from several government agencies such as the NIEHS, the CDC, the FDA, and the EPA, as well as without the findings found in articles published in several scholarly journals. Are there any questions? I have listed my contact information below. Please feel free to contact me for further questions or for directions to additional resources. Thank you, residents of Pulaski County, for being such a great audience. I hope you enjoyed this presentation about the adverse health effects related to bisphenol A exposure. Thank you.